Cassie and Mike consider themselves as something of ghost hunters. They liked to travel to different places across America that were rumored to be haunted. They had been to asylums, prisons, and just good old-fashioned houses said to house restless souls. They would take their cameras to record any paranormal events, though their track record was dubious at best. They had recorded creaking floorboards and odd sounds, but hadn't truly found any concrete evidence of the supernatural. They needed just one good location, one good story of a haunting to tell. They had been doing a shoot in a supposedly haunted house in Alabama. The house was certainly creepy, but all the footage they had was of the two of them randomly yelling, "Are there any spirits who want to come forward?" or "We mean you no harm." To be honest, they looked pretty stupid. They stopped at a bar and drank their frustration. They complained about their lack of findings when an elderly man sitting nearby interrupted. "You want to go to a real haunted place? You should head up to the Barrison Plantation. Little known except for the people around these parts, but certainly the most haunted place you'll ever find." "Pete, shut up and drink your beer. The dead ought to be left in peace," the man next to him said. "Peace? Peace? There is no peace for the souls who died there." Pete turned to Cassie and Mike. "That place was the spot of great evil. At least 20 slaves perished mysteriously at the hands of the Barrisons' wife Annalise. She enjoyed torturing the slaves. It was like a game to her. Whippings, burnings, disfigurings, she did it all, and just for fun. Sometimes she used the excuse of a slave disobeying or making a mistake. Sometimes she didn't even bother with that. It all came to a hand, and one day when Annalise was beating a pregnant slave girl named Margaret, Margaret's brother Samuel Young took a giant branch from an old oak tree and stabbed Annalise through the stomach. She died, and Samuel was taken to the gallows and strung up for killing his mistress. It's said that he was smiling the whole time, even in death. "Oh, stop," the other man said. "It's just a scary story. Who knows how much, if any of it, is true?" "It is so." Pete turned to the young friends. "If you don't believe me, then go see for yourselves. Keep going south, then turn left on Prisons Road. You'll know you're there when you see 2 large iron gates." Cassie and Mike looked at each other and shrugged. They had nothing better to do. Might as well check out this detour. They got up and thanked Pete before checking into the cheap motel in the adjoined parking lot. They were too drunk to drive, and they wanted to be sharp if they were going to do an investigation. The plantation would wait till the next morning. When the sun rose, Cassie and Mike packed their things and headed in the direction that old Pete had given them. They made it to the giant gates. They were wrapped in overgrown plants. That wasn't all they were wrapped in. The gates were chained and bolted. The 2 friends had no choice but to abandon their car. They climbed the property walls with the help of the great overgrown vines entangling most of the property. They made it over, careful not to damage their cameras. Then they began to walk. The manor was about a half a mile away from the gate. Looking around, no one could easily imagine a thriving plantation where the plant life had taken over. To the right of the manor was an old wooden building that looked like it had been eaten away by termites in harsh weather. That was probably the slave quarters. They would visit there after the manor. The once undoubtedly beautiful manor was now missing its front door. Cobwebs shrouded every corner and everything was thick with dust. There was a large staircase in the middle of the room that stopped at a small piece of floor before breaking off in 2 directions. On that floor was a giant picture, but dust covered it, making it impossible to see the image. They turned their cameras on and slowly made their way up the stairs. Once on the landing, Mike took off his jacket and used it to wipe down the picture. It was a portrait. There was a stern-looking man standing behind a chair. He was older and looked mean. This had to be Master Barrison. In the chair sat a beautiful Southern belle. Her smile was warm and her blue eyes hypnotizing. Annalise certainly didn't look like the monster she was rumored to be. If anything, her husband was the one who looked evil. They decided to go up the left set of stairs. They made it to an old door and pushed it open, causing a loud creaking sound. This room looked to be a home office. They walked to the giant desk in the middle of the room, recording everything they could see. "Hey, look at this!" Mike said as he flipped through a giant booklet. Cassie looked it over. On each page was a picture of a slave, their name and information pertaining to them, including the date and cause of their death. My God, there has to be over 50 people in here, Cassie said breathlessly. Look, Mike said. Most of these show how and when they died, but some have the cause of death left blank. They stood silently, almost as if not wanting to insult the dead with their inadequate words. Suddenly, they heard the sound of feet frantically running down the hall. At that exact same time, their camera stopped working, leaving pixels and white noise as the only thing the screen was picking up. The white noise kept getting louder and louder until it was turning into an almost screeching sound. They turned the cameras off. There was a strong sense of not being alone. I think someone wants their privacy, Mike said, unnerved. They had always wanted to experience the supernatural, and it seemed like they got their wish. They both walked out the room shakily, following the direction of the footsteps. They kept walking when a door to their right burst open. Cassie let out a scream of shock as Mike felt like his heart would explode. They paused before slowly walking into the room. It was a bedroom, huge with a 4-poster bed. Judging by the decor, it would have belonged to a woman. I think this was Annalise's room, said Cassie. They walked around the room. Cassie ended up at a grand nightstand adorned with gold trimming and beautiful little trinkets. She picked up an oddly shaped painted bowl. Inside was a pearl necklace and a few rings. The material of the bowl was like nothing she's ever felt. It was like ivory. She looked up at her reflection when she noticed 2 distinct holes reflecting on the other side of the bowl. Curious, she turned the bowl around to get a better look. She stared for a while as if trying to put a puzzle together when she shrieked and dropped it, jewelry flying everywhere. "It's a skull," she yelled. "What?" Mike said. "The bowl. It's a skull, or at least part of one." She looked like she was going to be sick. I wanted to get the fuck out of here. "Wait," Mike said, stopping Cassie from walking out of the room. "We finally found a place that looks like it is truly haunted. This is what we came here for." No? I didn't come here to touch a human skull," Cassie said angrily. "I'm guessing whoever it belonged to didn't want their head used as a decorative dish." "Cassie, we've hit the jackpot. You can't seriously..." He stopped. Looking over Cassie's shoulder, Cassie turned around and stared in amazement. Standing in the doorway was Annalise. She looked just like she did in the picture. A large hoop skirt dress, a large necklace adorning her neck, delicate chocolate brown curls styled beautifully upon her head. She was beautiful, with delicate features and large eyes. The only difference was that those beautiful facial features were set in a furious expression. "You dare come in my room?" Her voice seemed distant, like it didn't belong on this plane of existence. "Ah!" Mike screamed, the back of his shirt torn from what looked to be a whip mark. "Get out! Get out! Get out!" the spirit screamed. This time, Mike didn't have a problem with leaving. They booked it, running down the hall. They thought leaving the manor would be enough, but to their surprise, they saw the ghost of Annalise was following them with a whip in hand. They made it outside, but Cassie tripped on a root pushed out of the unkept ground. She yelped as she twisted her ankle. Mike knelt beside her to try and help her, but a force pushed him to the ground. They both looked up as the spirit loomed over them. "I shall whip the skin off your backs." She raised the whip in the air. The friends closed their eyes in anticipation, but the blows never came. They opened their eyes to see Annalise looking behind them in fear. They cautiously turned around, scared of what they'd see. Behind them stood a large black man in old, worn-out clothing. He was glaring at Annalise as if he was daring her to bring the whip down. Both spirits stood there in a moment before Annalise disappeared. Cassie and Mike turned to the man in fear. His facial expression softened as he looked upon them. "You're okay now," he said in the same distant way. "My name is Samuel." "Are you Samuel Young?" Cassie asked. "So you've heard of me," he said with a tint of pride in his voice. "The lady of the house feared hell, so she stayed on this plane. I wasn't about to let her torment the spirits on the ground to hurt to find the rest. I lived a slave," he continued. "I died a hero, and now I am my own master, as well as the greatest nightmare of Annalise Barrison. It still lives on, Mike said. He felt a sense of hopelessness, like evil would live forever. Hatred, evil, it is always there. True, Samuel said, and there will always be people like me to put a stop to it. With that, Samuel disappeared. The friends left the property. Their career as ghost hunters was over, but a lightness they hadn't experienced was just beginning to bloom.